Pretend like you can hear me. Smile, take notes, like pass notes, whatever. Great to be here tonight. I'm excited to bring this topic to you about hooking up. But before I start with the presentation tonight, I like to know a little bit about the audience that I get the opportunity to speak to. So just curious, by a show of hands, how many of you at some point in your future, not tomorrow, not this year, not next year, but how many of you think that there is a point in your future when you would like to be a married person? Raise your hand if there's a point in, okay, look at that, okay, whole room full of you, this will be good. How many of you are currently in a relationship with someone and you've been in that relationship for 3 months or longer? 3 months or longer, okay, how many of you are here with that person? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. How many of you are not, how many just single, just not in a relationship, absolutely single? Okay, thank you. Yeah, dude over here is looking around, well played. How many of you don't know for sure what your relationship status is? Please raise your hand. Okay, we respect that. That's real life. So we're all at different stages when it comes to relationship, but judging by how the room went, it looks like just about everybody is interested in having marriage at some point in your future. How many of you, in your childhood, somewhere in your adolescence, got the talk from your mom and dad? The sex talk, the birds and the bees, how many of you? Okay, real high, real high, real high. How many of you got the talk? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird was it for you? 7? 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, 9. Did anyone have like a really cool the talk with their parents and it was, okay, you got a good one? Yeah. Apparently you need to get all their parents together and sit them down and tell them how to give the talk because you're the only one who had a good the talk. You had a good talk with...
As I got older, it was like easier to talk. It was like when we were younger, like, ew, gross.
Okay, so as you got older, it became more part of the real world that we live in. Okay, excellent. Now, I've got one last question for you before we really jump into the content tonight. How is it that two people can fall in love, they can get engaged, they can go to an altar, and they can make a promise to one another, I will love you for my life. I love you more than any other person on the planet. It is you for me. It is me for you. Love is where we belong. We are together forever. How is it that two people can make that promise and 5 years later they hate each other more than they hate any other person on the planet? Do you know anyone who's had that as their story? Okay, wouldn't you think there's better people in the world to hate? I mean, I don't know, maybe someone in ISIS is better to hate than the person they pledged their life to, but it happens. We've seen it happen. How do you keep it from happening? Well, that's what we really want to start to talk about tonight. There's a big idea that a lot of people overlook, and that is this: a promise is no substitute for preparation. People imagine if I make my promise, if I promise to love the person, if I make my promise, then everything will be fine because my promise is sincere. I really mean it with my promise. But what they ignored in all their wedding planning and all their invitations and all their planning of the flowers and everything else and all the work they poured into the wedding day, what they ignored were the 10, 15, 20 years of baggage they've built up along the way, the relationship baggage, the family baggage, the single people baggage. We're going to talk a little bit about single people baggage tonight. And they didn't deal with all of their past, and they brought their past into their future or present marriage. See, here's something, I say this sometimes and I lose some people, including myself, when I say it because it's a little deep. Your present right now, your present will become your past, which will be present in your future. Okay, follow all that? Okay. Whatever you're doing right now relationally, there will be a point in your future where this is your past. However, your past has an annoying way of not staying in your past. Okay, have you noticed that? How your past can show up in your future when it becomes your present? This doesn't happen anywhere else like it does in relationships, right? And when it comes to marriage, it gets blown up really big because A promise in marriage is no substitute for preparing yourself for marriage. And preparation for marriage doesn't happen when you meet your soulmate. It's already happening. You have already been preparing, which means those of you who said, yes, I'd like to be married someday, which was just about all of you, you will have already been preparing for the quality of your future marriage, even if you haven't had a date in a year. Does that make sense? You tracking with me? All right. Here's what we want to do tonight. This is probably way too small to read in the back. Is this too small to read in the back? Okay. Did you try squinting? Just checking. I'll tell you what it says. This is the smallest font on here. Here's why I believe this is worth the price of your attention this evening. Number one, deciding to marry or not marry someone will have more impact on the quality and outcome of your life than any other decision. I don't think that needs a lot of explanation or defense. That's going to impact your life more than any other decision you make. Number two, falling in love requires a pulse. How many of you have a pulse? Raise your hand. You are a candidate to fall in love. Congratulations. Staying in love requires a plan, which means you need to be prepared. You can all fall in love. You can fall, I bet some of you could fall in love by Saturday. But staying in love requires a plan. It requires preparation. Last thing is this. Culture is not leading you in the right direction. About how many marriages end up in divorce? Those of you who want to be married, how many marriages end in divorce? 50%. Okay, about 50%, give or take-ish. How many Christian marriages end in divorce? Same percentage. Do you know that? There's no statistically hardly a difference between non-Christian and Christians who get married in terms of divorce rate. All of you people who said, I want to get married someday, how many of you are looking forward to getting a divorce? No one? Okay. Culture's not leading us in the right direction with this. How do you prepare for a future marriage, even if you're single right now? We have two goals tonight. Number one, I want to make you better at dating tonight. That's one of our goals. I want you to be better at dating. I'm not going to get you a date. That's on you. I did everything I could to grease the wheels. I said who's single. You had your chance. But I want to make you better at dating. Second thing is this. I want to show you how to make decisions today that will make a great marriage later. I've never met a person who said, I want an average marriage. I want a mediocre marriage. I want a marriage where we tolerate each other. I want a marriage where it's just the kids that hold us together, but we don't really love each other anymore. You don't want that. But did you know that God doesn't want that either? That if you're going to get married, God wants you to have a great marriage. But today already you are making the decisions that will determine whether or not you have a great marriage later. So that's what we're going to do tonight. To do that, I'm actually going to talk about a couple of myths that people believe about relationships when it comes to being in your stage of life. First, I want to talk about weddings. How many of you have been to a wedding in the last 4 months? Okay, good deal of you. How many of you at that wedding, they read 1 Corinthians 13? If you don't know what that one is, 1 Corinthians 13 is sometimes called what? The love chapter. Right? And what does it say love is? Patient, love is kind, it does not. And yeah, okay, you know that one. Okay, stop. Hold on. You see this? I have the microphone. That means I talk. You stop. No, I'm kidding. It's called the love chapter, and you hear it at all the weddings. You're like, okay, yep, good reminder. Yep, that's what love does. A lot of times I notice that couples stop their reading before they get to the end of the chapter. Do you know how 1 Corinthians chapter 13 ends after it does all that love stuff? Here's how it ends. 1 Corinthians 13:11. Can you read that in the back? All right, we're good. It says, after all that love stuff, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, or when I became an adult, I put childish ways behind me. We as a nation have been taught to have incredibly childish views of relationships. It started with Disney. What happens in a fairy tale plot? You've got Well, there's actually been a shift, but the plot still plays out. It used to be a handsome prince and a princess in distress. Now the plot's shifted. Have you noticed that in recent years? Now it's the heroic princess with somebody else in distress. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Same plot line. And you see these two people, and at the beginning of the fairy tale, are they together? Nope, they're not together yet, but you see both of them on the screen, or you hear about both of them in the story, and you think, oh man, if we could just get these two people together, boom, sparks would fly, it would be magical. They could live what? How would they live if we could get these two people together? Happily ever after. So the story begins, the drama begins, there's the dragon to slay, there's the evil queen to kill, there whatever peril they have to overcome, whatever trial they have to defeat. The fairy tale goes on, and there's some harrowing moments, but finally at the end, they slay the beast, they come together, they kiss, and they live. And we call this genre of literature a fairy tale. And who are fairy tales for? Children. Because they are childish. Yet we live in a culture that promotes the idea that somewhere out there is your soulmate. And as soon as you meet your soulmate, if we can just get you together with your soulmate, wherever that person is, if we can just get you together and you can kiss, what's going to happen? Sparks will fly and you will live happily ever after. What kind of thinking is that? Childish thinking. When I work with couples, when they come to me and say, oh, Jason, we want to get married and we're in love, and I say, great, we've got a great pre-marriage course at our church. You'll get in a group with other couples. You're going to meet with me for 8 weeks, and we're going to do marriage boot camp. Because let me tell you what's going to happen, you in love, starry-eyed couple. You're going to get married, and all of a sudden, down the road, you're going to start hitting some bumps in the road, and things are not going to go well, and the wheels might even fall off, and you're going to think, I married the wrong person. The reality isn't that you married the wrong person. Do you know what the reality is? You got married. That's what that means. That's all that means. You got married is what that means. You laugh now, just you wait, you people who wanted to get married. Who knows Samson? Tell me something about Samson from the Bible. Long hair, strong. Who's his lady friend? Delilah. Do you know that was not his first wife? Actually, they didn't get married. They just lived together. He had a wife before her. We don't even know her name. Here's what happened. Judges chapter 14. By the way, we're not going to do this tonight. Highly recommend, if you just want to learn how not to do relationships, go to the book of Judges, start at chapter 14, read the entire story of Samson. Whatever he does in a relationship, don't do it. It's bad. Here's just an example. Samson went down to Timnah, a Philistine city. Samson was a good Jewish boy, and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Hasn't even spoken to the woman yet. Well, what criteria is he using to figure out if she's good marriage material? Yeah. What does she look like? So he wants to have her as his wife. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? You can imagine, his mother saying, isn't there a nice Jewish girl you can marry? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the what? She's the right one. She's my soulmate. She's smoking hot. She's the one. Get her for me. That's how Samson approached marriage. Here's the marriage myth. Samson believed it. People today believe it. Maybe you believe it. The marriage myth is, if I marry the right person, everything will be. If I marry the right person, everything will be all right. If I marry the right person, everything will be all right. Let me just show you what happens when you believe the marriage myth. You do meet the right person, the sparks do fly, the love does happen, and things are going so well. What do couples decide to do when they're really, 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 really in love? You have sex. It's not a trick question. Have sex. That's what couples decide to do when they're really, really, really in love. I mean, hey, after all, you wouldn't buy a new pair of shoes without trying them on, right? And you wouldn't buy a new car without taking it for a test drive. So they start having sex. Maybe they move in with one another to make sure it's all right, to make sure they're the right person. Because if it's the right person, how's everything going to turn out? All right, and everything works great, and there's sparks, and there's romance, and they have chemistry, and it's amazing. So they get engaged, and they go to the altar, and they say, I do, and then they get married. And what happens after you marry the right person? But you start hitting some bumps in the road, down the road. Now, here's why that happens. Because if you believe if I can find the right person, everything will be all right, do you know what you don't do? You don't prepare to get married. Because when there's chemistry, when I'm the one for you and you're the one for me and no two people have ever loved each other like we love each other, baby, when there's chemistry, you think to yourself, I don't have to learn how to prepare for marriage. This is easy. We have chemistry. I don't have to learn how to be a patient person. He's never going to do anything that's going to try my patience. And I don't have to learn how to be a loving person. Look how hot she is. I just love her all the time. So they don't prepare because they're trying to find the right person, but then they get married, and all of a sudden, here's what happens. All of their single people issues, all their family of origin issues, all their past relationship issues that they did not resolve, they quietly come in the baggage on the honeymoon, and nobody noticed because they thought they married the right person. Well, eventually, what happens in the marriage? The first thing to go is what? The chemistry. Do you know that this is actually a scientifically observed phenomena? Do you know how long chemistry lasts in the average relationship? 2 years. Chemistry lasts for 2 years. In case you're wondering, how many of you have been? No. 2 years, chemistry starts to go. And when people are living on chemistry, they've never learned how to be in love. But the chemistry starts to fade, and they're like, man, they start wondering, maybe I didn't marry the right person. Exactly, because this is harder than they thought. This is more difficult than they thought. Then she has a great idea. Do you know what idea she has to save their marriage? Let's have a baby. Yeah, that'll fix a dysfunctional relationship. Another dependent human being. So they have a baby, and then no one's sleeping, and everyone's agitated. And then he's just stressed out, tired, and he's at work one day at his desk, and he looks up, and do you know who he sees walk by? The right person. Because he thought he married the right person. Maybe it was the wrong person, but maybe she's the right person. And she's at the gym or she's at Starbucks, and all of a sudden she bumps into an old high school friend of hers, and all of a sudden, guess what she realizes? I married the wrong person. Here's the right person for me. And the cycle starts all over again. And when that happens, you know what you end up with? 2 used shoes and 2 used cars. Because they thought if I find the right one, everything will be all right. Here's the marriage reality. Become the kind of person that the person you are looking for is looking for. I'm just full of great wisdom tonight, aren't I? Like, what was that, Yoda? No. Become the kind of person the person you are looking for is looking for. You're looking for the right person. Do you have that person in mind? You should kind of have, I'm looking for this kind of person. What characteristics? Do they love God? Do they worship Jesus? Do they honor you as a child of God? Okay. Well, how do you find that person? You know how you find that person? You become the kind of person that the person you're looking for is looking for. I mean, what kind of person would that person be interested in? That's how you find that kind of person. And the more you work on becoming that kind of person, guess what you're doing? You are preparing for marriage. You are dealing with baggage. You are dealing with issues from your past. Now, that's kind of big and an overview and broad kind of thing. I mean, if that's helpful, take it with you tonight, great. I want to talk with the balance of our time tonight on one very, very specific issue on becoming the kind of person that the person you're looking for is looking for. Tonight, I want to talk specifically about what you do with your sexuality right now that impacts your marriage later. Now, in our culture, there is a myth. Just like there's a myth with marriage, there's also a myth with sex. And the sex myth goes like this. Sex is only physical. The sex myth is that sex is only physical, and hey, as long as everyone's consenting, and as long as no one's getting hurt, and as long as everybody's being safe, then hey, what's the big deal? What's the problem? It's only physical, and after all, we're in love. What's the big deal? Now, I want to show you why this is a myth. Why is it that if a child is sexually abused, when that child grows up and they understand the implications of what happened, that person can't simply shake off what happened? If sex is something that's only physical, why is that so devastating to a person from their childhood? Why is it that rape is so devastating to a person? If sex is only physical, can't we say that, well, rape, that's just like getting beat up and come on, get over it? You would never say that to someone. Because deep down we know that someone was hurt on a level that was way, way, way deeper than physical when it came to that crime. Why is it that psychologists know and will tell you that men who have the deepest sexual addictions had absentee fathers when they were growing up? Because they know there's a connection. We say, hey, if sex is only physical, maybe that's just their thing and that's what they're into. No, no, no. Psychologists will tell you there was something with their father growing up. Why is it that in my profession, I'm a pastor, why is it that when people come to me to talk about their deepest regrets, I already know it has something to do with sex? When people come and they say, Jason, can I talk with you about something? I've never talked to anyone about this before. I already know something. I know they're not going to tell me, one time I was in Walgreens and I stole some makeup. That's not what they're going to talk about. They're not going to say, one time I was at the mall and I backed into another car in the parking lot and I didn't leave a note and I drove off. They're not going to talk about that. It's going to have something to do with sex and their body. Why is it that people carry scars deep in their emotions and on their soul when it comes to this topic if it's only physical? That's what I want to talk about tonight. Question is, if the way our culture approaches sex isn't working, why does our culture keep approaching relationships this way? Before we answer that, I want to illustrate it pretty simply. I've already weirded a few people out with these gloves tonight, so don't get weirded out, but especially considering the topic that I'm getting these gloves on. Earlier this calendar year, the very campus in which you are sitting made international news. Does anybody know how this campus made international news back in January? Stradivarius violin, valued at $6 million, was stolen after a performance at this campus. Well, I'd like to invite Pastor Wayne Chevy up on stage here to help me with something, because I actually brought something tonight that I want to show all of you. Antonio Stradivari, thank you, sir. Antonio Stradivari was born in Cremona, Italy in 1644. Oh, it's open, thank you. Did I authorize you to unzip this? He was born in Cremona, Italy in 1644 and became one of the most renowned instrument manufacturers in the world. By the age of 20, he was already recognized in his day as being a remarkably talented music maker. He devoted his attention and energy to the violin. Now, today, if you have a Stradivarius violin that was made in the early years of his workmanship from about 1675 to 1700, it would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps millions of dollars. One Stradivarius violin made in 1695 that was owned by Napoleon actually sold at auction recently for $3.5 million. The one that was stolen from this campus was made in 1715. 1700 to 1725 was the golden age of Stradivarius. Those are all worth millions of dollars. One actually sold at auction recently for over $15 million. The reason why is because the violins he made are unmatched. Some people say they had a supernatural sound that has not been mimicked to this day in spite of how hard people have tried. Now, he made approximately 1,100 of these violins. 650 of them are still around today. Now, what I would like to know is, does anybody in the room play any musical instruments? Any musicians in the room? Yeah, in the green shirt back there, you play music? Yeah. Okay, are you any good? Okay, very cool. Would you come here please for a second? Yeah, here. Take this. Take it to that guy in the green shirt back there. Check it out, then pass it down your row. And if anyone wants to handle that, see that, touch that, great. And if somebody remembers, get it back in that case before I go home. Thanks. Would you treat a Stradivarius violin that way? No. Do you know what's worth way more than a Stradivarius? Do you know what's way more valuable than a Stradivarius? Your sexuality. Why would you handle it in a way that is as careless as that with something that is more priceless than an instrument? Do you not know how much more valuable you are to God than an instrument? He invites us to be wise when it comes to our sexuality. And generally speaking, the way people approach sex in our culture isn't leading to fulfillment, lifelong fulfillment. It's leading to heartache. Ask anyone you want, age 70 and older, who is happily married. I don't mean like, okay, we made it 50 years, so now we'll force the kiss at the anniversary for the photographer. I mean, they're still doing gross stuff after 50 years of marriage because they just love each other. You ask that person, what's the secret to a great marriage? You know what they will not say, I promise you, because I actually ask people stuff like this in my job. I get to see people at a lot of stages of life. They will not say, I'll tell you the secret to having an incredible marriage. Before you get married, you just sleep with as many people as you can along the way and get practiced up for it. Because no, you will not find that. So what if we re-engineered the sex myth that says sex is only physical, and we looked at the sex reality? The reality is that sex is for married people. Now, I know full well that if I go through town saying, hey everyone, just want all of you to know sex is not for consenting people, it is not for in-love people, sex is for married people, you know the kind of reaction I'm going to get. Yeah, whatever, preacher, go back to church, whatever it is the kind of reaction I'm going to get. But is the way our society, is it the way we approach sex, is it actually working? That's not a real Stradivarius, by the way, guys. You really don't have to pass it around anymore. It's a rental. I rented it on the way here. It's cheap. Here's an illustration that might help it make sense. I am married to my beautiful wife Kathy, who puts up with me. We've got 3 kids, 3 boys. They're 10, 9, and 6 years old. And one of the things we love to do in the summer is go camping. Anybody grow up in a family that goes camping? So the first thing we do when we all jump out and get to our campsite is my boys will run through the woods and find firewood, and they'll bring it all back to the fire pit. And I'm like, all right, so I'll stack the wood, and I brought the gas, and I brought the matches, and I light the fire. And as soon as I light the campfire, you know what my 3 boys do? They go find the biggest, longest stick they can. They light one end on fire, and when it's good and hot and flaming, they go running through the woods like they're Tarzan through the jungle, because now they have a torch, and this is awesome. I'm like, hey, hold on, everybody. Time out. Boys, bring the fire back to the fire pit and put the sticks in the campfire. But Dad, you started the fire. I know I started the fire. Bring it all back. But Dad, it's fun. No. Fire's fun in the fire pit. Okay, camping's not camping without fire in the fire pit. But when you take it out of the fire pit and into the woods, we have damage, hurt, destruction. Whose idea was sexuality? God's idea. How many of you grew up in church world or just with parents, and the impression that was given was, all right, now son, listen to me. Just remember, sex is dirty, gross, and disgusting, so save it for the person you love. Did anybody have that kind of talk, impression given? It's not gross, but neither is it what society makes it. It's not God either. It's not gross, it's not God, it's just a gift. Just like, and it's good, and like campfire is good in the fire pit, and it's bad when we take it out. God said, that's how sex works. It's powerful, it's good, and I made a safe place for it, but when we take it out of that safe place, marriage, it becomes destructive. That's how God designed sex to work. Now, the idea that we have that sex is for married people is not just laughable in our society. It's always been laughable. Did you know that? It's not like Americans are so enlightened and progressive that we decided sex is for anybody who's consenting. That's always been the case. But that's why there is incredible wisdom in the Bible that speaks to this topic that helps get you ready to have great relationships and great marriages. And by the way, you know what part of a great marriage is? Great sex for decade after decade after decade. I know that sounds gross, but you'll get there, trust me. Paul wrote this to a church in the first century world, placed in the city of Corinth, and they had the same ideas about sex that we as Americans have about sex today. It's just fun, it's only physical, it's for consenting people, married people, whatever. That is so old-fashioned. Here's what he writes. He says, the body is not meant for sexual immorality. Well, what does sexual immorality mean? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Kind of an awkward question to answer in public, huh? Yes, please. Okay, very good. I'll tighten that up a little bit to be a little more clear because this is a place where people like to have a lot of wiggle room, no pun intended. Sexual immorality is sexual contact outside of the marriage bed. Does that make sense? Sexual contact outside of the marriage covenant. That's a different talk for a different day. Marriage is not a contract, it's a covenant. I'm all in, not I will if you will. But the body is not meant for sexual immorality, sexual contact outside of marriage. It's not why you have a body, in case you're wondering. If you ever wondered, philosophy class, why do I have a body? Well, this isn't the reason for sexual immorality. But this is the reason for the Lord. Why do you have a body? For the Lord. What does that mean? And the Lord for the body. By His power, God raised the Lord from the dead, and He will raise us also. This is Paul's way of just saying, in their day there were Stoic philosophers. You know what the Stoics thought? If we think long enough, we'll figure this out. That's my abbreviated version. If we think long enough, we'll figure this out. I know it's more nuanced than that. And then, in addition to Stoics, there are Epicureans. What do the Epicureans go with? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That's what they went with. He's really dealing with that. They say, hey, you only get to go around this planet once, so you might as well live it up. He's like, no, actually, the money you have here is not the only wealth you'll ever have. The life you have here is not the only life you'll ever have. And the body you have right now is not the only body you'll ever have. You'll have a resurrected body which will live forever. So let's not get so hung up on here and now that we forget the eternity that follows. He said, the body is for the Lord. The Lord will raise us from the dead. Now, because of that, Paul talked further about what we do with our bodies. Because what we do with our bodies is important. So that's why in Romans chapter 12, he taught us a profound idea that we don't often think about. Those of you who grew up in families that went to churches, you were probably taught, or maybe you just assumed somewhere along the way, that to worship God, where do you go? Church. You go to church, and that's how you worship God. Here's what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 12. He said, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your, what? Bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper, what? What is worship according to Paul? What you do with your body. Specifically, offering your bodies as a sacrifice to God, not a dead sacrifice, a living, ongoing, breathing sacrifice. What you do with your body is worship. Now, to further unpack this idea that what you do with your body is worship, a few chapters earlier in Romans chapter 1, he says something profound about worshipers. He said they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator. Every human being on this planet, atheist, Christian, agnostic, Buddhist, Islam, whatever, is a worshiper. Every single human being on this planet is a worshiper. Something or someone is the object of your devotion, your affection, your trust, your identity, your meaning. Everyone is a worshiper. What Paul clarifies for us here is you're going to worship one of two things. You will either worship the Creator or you will worship created things. Those are your only two options. You can worship Creator God or you can worship something that Creator God made. What this means is sexual immorality, what you do with your body, is not really a naughty sex problem. Fundamentally, this is a worship problem. If what you do with your body is worship, that means that sexual immorality is primarily nothing else than idolatry. To worship something that God created rather than Creator God. If you have a problem with porn, you don't properly have a porn problem, you have a worship disorder. If you're into sexual immorality with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you don't primarily have a sexual immorality problem, you have a worship disorder. You have an idolatry problem, worshiping something God created, or in this case, someone God created, rather than Creator God. I'm not here tonight to tell you, don't have sex before you're married. That is not my message. My message is worship Jesus. Some of you, you'll come up afterwards and say, you know, Jason, my boyfriend, my girlfriend and I, we've been dating a long time. We're in love. We're going to get married. In fact, you might even be engaged already. So we're having sex. What's the big deal? We love each other. We consent. We're going to get married. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because God calls that sexual immorality, and you're worshiping your boyfriend instead of Jesus. You're worshiping your girlfriend instead of Jesus. You're worshiping your fiancé instead of Jesus. You say, well, what about the 21st century? What about tolerance? What about Jesus? What you do with your body is worship. And are you worshiping something or someone God created, or are you worshiping Creator God? That's what this all comes down to. Who are you going to worship? So if you were God and you knew how much devastation sexual sin causes people, if you were God and you knew how sex was designed and how it's supposed to work and how good it can be in the context of marriage and how destructive it can be when we take it out of marriage, if you were God and you knew all these things about sex, what would you say about it if you were God? I mean, I know you've wanted to be God at some points because He wasn't getting your script right, but what would you say about it? He would say, do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? Like, wait a minute, wait. We're not going there. I have totally not done that one, Jason. This is something totally different. Well, it is, but it isn't. First century Roman world. Same problem we had today, different application. Prostitution was socially accepted in the first century Roman world. In fact, at pagan Roman temples, part of the worship was you go to the pagan temple of Zeus or whomever, you hire the temple prostitute, and part of the worship act is actually engaging in sexual immorality. Seems weird to us, but they always had really high attendance at their church services. Crazy thing. So that was socially acceptable. Two times in Roman history, bills came before the Roman Senate proposing that middle and upper class men be forced to get married. Do you know why that bill came to the Roman Senate twice? Because middle and upper class men were not getting married. They weren't having families. They would just go hire prostitutes, and that was their sexual outlet, and they didn't have families. And as a result, women were getting thrust below the poverty line. Children were not only being thrust below the poverty line, most children were not being kept. The birth rate in the Roman Empire was atrocious for that very reason. So what they call going to hire a prostitute, that's just hooking up. That's just what we call hooking up today. You know, we don't call it that. We're just going out with my boyfriend, going out with my girlfriend, whatever it is. Same application, same thing. He says, when you do that, you are one with her in body, to which this first century world said, wait a minute, I'm not one with her. It's just sex. I'm just having sex with her. I'm not uniting with her. I'm just having sex with her. He says, for it is said, the two will become one flesh. But he who unites himself with the Lord is one with him in spirit. Who are you uniting with? The Lord or someone the Lord created? That's what this is all about. So knowing all of this, God says, everyone read it together, flee from sexual immorality. Who knows what flee means?
Get as far away as you can from it.
Run like your hair is on fire is what flee means in the Greek language. You can look it up. Flee from sexual immorality. That's what God would say about it, knowing how good it is or how damaging it can be. Flee from sexual immorality. Check this out. This is crazy. All other sins a man commits are outside his body, but he who sins sexually sins against what? His own body. Wait a minute. Paul, don't you mean he sins against God? Well, yeah, but he sins against his own body. What this teaches us and what experience confirms is that sexual sin is in a category all by itself, not because it's unforgivable, not because it's worse, not because it's so vile, but because it's a sin against your own body. That's why sexual sin stays with a person for years and years and years. That's why guilt lingers for years and years and years. That's why regret lingers for years and years and years, because not because it's worse, but because it's in a unique category in that way. So Paul writes, do you not know? What's the implication if this says, do you not know? What's the implication? They didn't know this. This is like brand new. Are you kidding me? I had no idea. Maybe we don't know either. Do you not know that your what? Your body. See, so many of us believe that God is only interested in your soul and your soul goes to heaven someday. God is interested in all of you because He loves all of you. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. You were bought at a price. When Jesus came to this earth, if all He came to do was to show you how sinful you are and condemn everyone for sinning and for being wrong, He would have been here for about 30 seconds. He would have shown up and said, okay, everyone, Son of God here. I'm going to warm up. Don't want to pull a hammy or anything. Here we go. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. You're wronger than her, and you are way wronger than him. And wrong, wrong, sinner, 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 wrong. Son of God, peace out. Now, and off he goes. That's all He would have done. He would have been here 30 seconds, back up to heaven. There He goes. But Jesus looked at us and He looked at everything that we should have known and He says, don't you know? Don't you know how much Creator God has planned for you? Don't you know the heart of Creator God who made you, and He made you as a sexual creature? Don't you know how much love He has for you, that He sent me to live for you, to die for you, to forgive you? Because Jesus knows your sin already. As you're sitting here tonight, He knows exactly how some of you have been sinning. And do you know what He did with that knowledge? He died for you. He forgave you. So that God would look at you now and not identify you by your sin, but He would call you my child. That ladies, He would look at you and He would call you my daughter. That gentleman, He would look at you and He would call you my son. That just as God looked at Jesus and said, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Through Jesus Christ, God looks at you and says, "This is my child whom I love. With you I am well pleased," because of everything that Jesus did on your behalf. Listen, here's what I want you to know today. For those of you who have been sinning in this way, this is God saying, repent. Worship me, love me, trust me, honor me with your body. And I love you. I have grace for you. I want the best for you. I want you to have a great marriage someday more than you want a great marriage someday. And trust me, this is the path to take you there. You were bought at a price. Honor God with your body. Here's what I want you to know. Purity paves the way to intimacy. Purity today paves the way to intimacy in your future marriage. What you do today with your body is preparing the way for the kind of marriage you will enjoy later. And when you meet the right person, if you haven't met the right person yet, what story do you want to tell that person? You know, I knew I'd meet you someday, so I had sex with as many people as I could along the way to practice for you. Is that the story you want to tell? Or maybe the story you want to tell is, you know what, I was worshiping a lot of things other than Jesus. One day there was this crazy guy on stage. I didn't like his talk, but it got me thinking about God. This isn't about me. I'm gonna go home tonight and you'll never see me again. It's not about me. But it got me thinking, I'm going to honor God. I'm going to trust God's plan. And I repented, and I've been waiting to meet you. You get to decide what story you tell, and you get to decide how you prepare for your future marriage. Here's our verse again, 1 Corinthians 13. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. So are you going to be childish when it comes to relationships, or are you going to think like someone who's mature? I'm going to pray for you guys. Father in heaven, this can be such a hard topic to wrestle to the ground. And I know that for everyone listening tonight, this hits in a lot of different places for us. There's some people right here, right now, who wish they hadn't come to hear this message. Father, I ask that you will be at work in their hearts, that they will not resist you, but they will love you, that they will be humble before you, because this will not only glorify you, it'll be for their good, Father. Give them wisdom to know what to do with what they've heard tonight. Give them courage to do it. Father, for the man or woman who's listening, and they're just filled with regret, they're filled with guilt over their present or their past. Father, I ask that they will have the courage to trust you, to know that you have so much love for them in Jesus Christ and that He does forgive all sins. Father, for the person who's listening tonight and they've been hurt sexually, they've been abused, they've been the victim. Father, I ask that you will heal them, that you will be with them, that you will strengthen them and restore them. Father, I ask that everyone who raised their hand who wants to be married someday, I want them to have a great marriage, but not as much as you do. So please give them the wisdom to know how to put these things into practice and the courage to trust you even when an entire society says they're foolish. Because you know they'll be blessed as they do this. And we ask this in the name of Jesus, who bought us with His blood. Amen. Thank you, everyone.